The concrete is rising. Jonathan Hancocks can feel it creeping up his legs, thick and cold, with the inexorable patience of floodwater. He's standing in a narrow trench, 23 feet below ground level, and the wooden formwork that's supposed to hold back thousands of pounds of wet concrete has just exploded inward. The sound was like a shotgun blast. Now, the gray sludge is pouring into his workspace, and he has maybe 60 seconds before it reaches his chest. He tries to move his right leg. It won't budge. The concrete has already hardened around his boot, locking his foot in place like a bear trap made of stone. His left leg is free, but there's nowhere to go. The trench is only 2 feet wide. Above him, 23 feet of vertical shaft disappears into a circle of gray November sky. There's a ladder, but it might as well be on the moon. Jonathan is 26 years old. He's been working construction for 8 years, and he knows exactly what happens when concrete sets around living tissue. He's seen it crush a man's hands so badly they had to amputate at the wrist. He's watched it burn through skin like acid because of the lime content. And he knows that once it starts to harden, you can't chip it away without breaking the bones underneath. The concrete is at his knees now. He can feel the weight of it, the pressure building against his legs like they're being squeezed in a vise. His heart is hammering so hard he can feel it in his throat. He opens his mouth to scream for help, but the sound that comes out is barely human. Above ground, the construction site at the M25 motorway expansion is chaos. The wooden formwork has blown out spectacularly, sending splinters of timber spinning through the air like shrapnel. Concrete is flooding across the site, swallowing tools and equipment. Workers are shouting, running, trying to shut off the pour. But nobody has noticed yet that Jonathan Hancocks isn't among them. Nobody has noticed that he's gone. The date is November 14th, 1999. The location is Junction 27 of the M25, Britain's orbital motorway, just outside London. The project is routine, the kind of thing that happens every day on construction sites across the country. They're building a bridge foundation, sinking massive concrete columns deep into the ground to support the weight of the roadway above. It's heavy work, dangerous work, but it's work that's been done 1,000 times before. Jonathan had clocked in that morning at 6:30, just as the sun was starting to burn through the November fog. He'd grabbed a cup of tea from the site office, black with 2 sugars, and headed to a station at column foundation number 3. His job was simple in theory, complicated in practice. He needed to be at the bottom of the shaft while the concrete was being poured from above, making sure it flowed evenly into the formwork, checking for air pockets, verifying that everything was setting properly. It was cold down there. The kind of cold that seeps through work clothes and settles in your bones. The shaft was a perfect cylinder, drilled through London clay and chalk, lined with temporary formwork that would be removed once the concrete had set. At the bottom where Jonathan was working, the space opened up slightly, like a bulb at the end of a stem. This was where the foundation would spread out, distributing the weight of the bridge across a wider area. The pour had started at 8:15. Above ground, a concrete truck had backed up to the shaft, and workers had positioned the delivery chute. Jonathan had given the signal, and the concrete had started flowing. At first, everything was going according to plan. The gray mixture cascaded down the shaft, splashing into the bottom chamber, and Jonathan used a long pole to guide it into place, breaking up air pockets, making sure it filled every corner. Then he'd heard the crack. It wasn't loud. Just a sharp, dry sound, like someone stepping on a twig. But Jonathan had been working construction long enough to know that sound. That was the sound of wood beginning to fail under pressure. He'd looked up, squinting against the concrete dust that was billowing down from above, trying to locate the source. That's when the formwork exploded. The wooden boards had been holding back the immense pressure of the wet concrete in the shaft above. Thousands of pounds of material pressing outward with hydraulic force. When the formwork failed, it failed catastrophically. The boards didn't just crack, they detonated inward, and the concrete that had been accumulating in the shaft came down in a wave. Jonathan had tried to run. He'd maybe taken 2 steps toward the ladder when the first surge hit him from behind, a liquid avalanche that knocked him forward and filled the chamber in seconds. He'd managed to grab onto the ladder with one hand, pulling himself partially upright, but his right foot had landed in a pool of concrete, and by the time he'd tried to lift it again, the chemical reaction had already begun. Concrete doesn't just dry, it cures. It generates heat as the calcium silicate hydrates form their crystalline structure. And once that process starts, it accelerates fast. Now, he's trapped. The concrete has risen to his waist and it's getting harder to breathe, not because of fumes, though the smell is overpowering, a chalky, chemical stench that coats the inside of his nose and throat, but because fear is constricting his chest like a fist. Every breath is a conscious effort, a fight against panic. He's shouting now, screaming for help at the top of his lungs, but his voice just echoes uselessly in the shaft above him. The sound of the concrete truck is still rumbling somewhere overhead, and there are men shouting, but they're dealing with the blowout, trying to stop the pour, trying to contain the mess. Nobody is thinking about the man at the bottom of the shaft because nobody realizes he's still down there. The concrete reaches his chest. The pressure is extraordinary. It feels like he's being crushed from all sides, like the earth itself is trying to squeeze the life out of him. He can barely expand his rib cage to breathe. Each inhalation is shallow, inadequate, leaving him gasping. The concrete is still liquid enough to flow, but thick, so thick, and getting thicker by the second. Jonathan's mind is racing through possibilities, through escape plans, but they all lead to nowhere. He can't climb. His legs are completely immobilized now, and even if they weren't, the ladder is 15 feet above him, unreachable. He can't dig himself out. The concrete is too heavy, too viscous. His hands might as well be pushing against solid rock. He can't even bend down to try to free his legs, because the concrete is holding his torso rigid, like he's been set in plaster from the waist down. The heat is building. That's what people don't understand about concrete. They think of it as a cold material, inert and lifeless. But the curing process is exothermic. It generates heat. And in a mass this large, with Jonathan's body trapped in the center, the temperature is rising fast. He can feel it through his work pants, a prickly warmth that would be almost pleasant, if it weren't so terrifying. He knows what this means. The concrete is setting faster than it should, accelerated by the chemical reaction. He has minutes, not hours. His arms are still free. That's something. He can move them, wave them, though there's nobody to see. The concrete has stopped rising, at least. It's at his chest, held there by some equilibrium of pressure and volume. But it's hardening around him, like armor, and he can feel his mobility decreasing with every passing second. Then he hears voices. They're distant, muffled by the 23 feet of shaft above him, but they're there. Someone is at the top of the hole, looking down. Jonathan screams with everything he has left. His voice cracks, goes hoarse, but he keeps screaming. And finally, blessedly, he hears someone shout back. There's someone down there. Jesus Christ! There's someone in the hole. The response is immediate and chaotic. More voices join the first, rising in pitch and urgency. Someone is calling for a foreman. Someone else is on a radio calling for emergency services. And Jonathan, trapped in his concrete tomb, feels a surge of hope so powerful it's almost painful. They know he's here. They're going to get him out.
But the hope lasts maybe 30 seconds before reality sets in, because getting him out isn't going to be simple. The concrete that's entombing him isn't just heavy, it's in the process of turning into rock. In a few hours, it will have the compressive strength of solid stone. They can't just pull him out. They can't drill down to him without risking his life. Every tool they might use to break through the concrete could just as easily break through him. A face appears at the top of the shaft, a man in a yellow hard hat, peering down into the darkness. He's shouting something, but Jonathan can't make out the words. The acoustics in the shaft are strange, turning everything into echoes and reverberations. Jonathan shouts back, trying to communicate, trying to make them understand that the concrete is still setting, that they need to hurry, but he doesn't know if they can hear him. The face disappears. Jonathan is alone again, staring up at that circle of gray sky, and the panic that he'd managed to push down comes roaring back. What if they can't get him out in time? What if they have to choose between his legs and his life? What if the concrete sets completely before they can figure out a solution? He tries to move again, thrashing against the concrete, but it's useless. The material has thickened to the consistency of clay, and it's pressing against him with thousands of pounds of force. He can feel it crushing his legs, compressing the tissue, cutting off circulation. His feet are numb now. He can't feel his toes at all. Time becomes elastic. Seconds stretch into minutes, minutes into eternities. Jonathan's world has contracted to this narrow cylinder of space, this gray coffin that smells of lime and chalk, and his own fear sweat. He can hear activity above, machinery moving, people shouting instructions, but none of it seems to translate into progress. Nobody is coming down to get him. Nothing is happening. And the concrete keeps hardening. The heat is intense now. His legs are burning, actually burning, and he realizes with sick horror that the lime in the concrete is causing chemical burns through his work pants. The fabric is supposed to be thick, protective, but it's no match for the alkaline slurry that's soaking through it. He can feel his skin starting to blister, the sensation like touching a hot stove, but spread across the entire surface of his legs. He's crying now, though he's not sure when the tears started. They're running down his face, cutting tracks through the concrete dust that's coating his skin. He's thinking about his family, his mother, who always worried about him working construction, his girlfriend Sarah, who'd kissed him goodbye that morning and told him to be careful, his mates at the pub, who he was supposed to meet tonight for a pint. Ordinary things, normal things, things that now seem impossibly precious because he might never do them again. Then he hears it. The sound of an engine, different from the concrete trucks, lower, more powerful, an excavator maybe, or a crane, something big, and voices, clearer now, coming from directly above. "We're going to get you out," someone shouts down. The voice is confident, authoritative. "Just hang on, we're working on it." Jonathan wants to believe them. He tries to believe them, but he can feel his strength ebbing, feel the concrete tightening around him like a python, and he's not sure how much longer he can hang on. The rescue operation above ground is rapidly expanding into something unprecedented. The site foreman, a man named David Mills, is coordinating with emergency services, but nobody has any experience with a situation like this. Men have been injured by concrete before, crushed by falling loads, or burned by contact with wet mix, but nobody has ever been fully entombed in a setting foundation 23 feet underground. The fire brigade has arrived, 3 trucks and a dozen firefighters, but their standard equipment is useless here. They can't use the jaws of life. They can't cut through concrete with their saws. They can't even get down to Jonathan without risking the integrity of the shaft. One wrong move and the whole thing could collapse, burying him completely. An ambulance is standing by, but the paramedics can only wait. They can't treat a patient they can't reach. They've lowered a communications line down the shaft, a length of rope with a 2-way radio attached. But Jonathan's arms are tiring, and he's struggling to hold the device close enough to his mouth to speak clearly. The conversation is fragmented, desperate. "How much of you is covered?" the paramedic asks. "From the waist down. Can't move my legs. Can't feel my feet." "Are you in pain?" "Yes. Burns. The concrete is burning me." There's a pause. The paramedic is conferring with someone, voices too low for Jonathan to hear. "We're going to get you out," the paramedic says finally, "but it's going to take time. You need to stay calm. Try to control your breathing." Stay calm. Jonathan almost laughs. He's buried alive in concrete that's turning into stone. His legs are on fire. He can barely breathe, and they're telling him to stay calm. But he tries. He closes his eyes and focuses on his breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. He tries to ignore the pressure on his chest, the heat in his legs, the smell of concrete and chemicals. He tries to think about something else, anything else. He thinks about Sarah. They'd been together for 2 years, talking about getting married, maybe buying a flat together. She worked as a teacher at a primary school in Barking. She was always coming home with stories about the kids, funny things they'd said or done. Jonathan loved listening to her, loved the way her face lit up when she talked about her work. He pictures her now, probably in the middle of a lesson, completely unaware that he's in danger. He wonders if someone will call her. He wonders what they'll say. The radio crackles. Jonathan, we're bringing in a specialist team. They're experts in confined space rescue. They'll be there in less than an hour. An hour. Jonathan feels his heart sink. An hour might as well be a year. The concrete is nearly solid now. I can't move at all. My legs have gone numb to absent. It's like they've been amputated, like I end at the waist and there's just nothing below that. And he's also getting cold. The heat from the curing concrete has faded, and now he's feeling the November chill. He's been sweating from fear and exertion, and his shirt is soaked through. The cold air coming down the shaft is making him shiver, violent tremors that he can't control. "I'm cold," he says into the radio. His voice sounds weak, even to his own ears. "We're going to lower down some blankets and some water. Have you had anything to drink?" Jonathan realizes he hasn't. His mouth is dry as dust, his tongue thick and swollen. "No," he says. Minutes later, a bundle comes down on a rope. Someone has tied together blankets and a plastic bottle of water. Jonathan grabs them with hands that are shaking so badly he almost drops the bottle. He manages to unscrew the cap and takes a long drink. The water is the best thing he's ever tasted, cold and clean, washing away the concrete dust that's been coating his throat. He wraps the blankets around his shoulders as best he can. They don't do much. The cold is coming from below, from the concrete that's encasing his lower body, and no amount of blankets can stop that. But it's something. It's a connection to the people above, a reminder that he's not alone. The rescue operation above ground is rapidly expanding into something unprecedented. The site foreman, a man named David Mills, is coordinating with emergency services, but nobody has any experience with a situation like this. Men have been injured by concrete before, crushed by falling loads, or burned by contact with wet mix, but nobody has ever been fully entombed in a setting foundation 23 feet underground. The fire brigade has arrived, 3 trucks and a dozen firefighters, but their standard equipment is useless here. They can't use the jaws of life. They can't cut through concrete with their saws. They can't even get down to Jonathan without risking the integrity of the shaft. One wrong move and the whole thing could collapse, burying him completely. An ambulance is standing by, but the paramedics can only wait. They can't treat a patient they can't reach. They've lowered a communications line down the shaft, a length of rope with a 2-way radio attached, but Jonathan's arms are tiring and he's struggling to hold the device close enough to his mouth to speak clearly. The conversation is fragmented, desperate. "How much of you is covered? From the waist down, can't move my legs, can't feel my feet. Are you in pain? Yes, burns, the concrete is burning me." There's a pause. The paramedic is conferring with someone, voices too low for Jonathan to hear. "We're going to get you out," the paramedic says finally, "but it's going to take time. You need to stay calm, try to control your breathing. Stay calm." Jonathan almost laughs. He's buried alive in concrete that's turning into stone. His legs are on fire. He can barely breathe, and they're telling him to stay calm. But he tries. He closes his eyes and focuses on his breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. He tries to ignore the pressure on his chest,
the heat in his legs, the smell of concrete and chemicals. He tries to think about something else, anything else. He thinks about Sarah. They'd been together for 2 years, talking about getting married, maybe buying a flat together. She worked as a teacher at a primary school in Barking. She was always coming home with stories about the kids, funny things they'd said or done. Jonathan loved
Too long, Rachel says honestly. The concrete will be fully cured by then, and we'd risk destabilizing this shaft in the process. Jonathan feels his chest tighten again. The panic is right there, waiting to overwhelm him. So what are you going to do? Pneumatic hammers, Rachel says. Small ones, very precise, and we're going to do it carefully. It's going to take a while, and it's going to be scary, but it's our best option. She disappears back up the shaft, and Jonathan is left to wait again. He can hear them setting up equipment above, the sound of generators starting, the clank of metal tools. And then, after what feels like hours, but is probably only 15 minutes, someone starts coming down the shaft. It's a man this time, younger than Rachel, wearing the same harness and headlamp. His name is Marcus, and he's carrying a small pneumatic chisel, the kind used for delicate masonry work. He positions himself on a small platform that they've lowered into the shaft, a wooden board suspended by ropes, and he looks at Jonathan with an expression that's somewhere between confidence and apprehension. "This is going to be loud," Marcus says, "and you're going to feel the vibrations, but I need you to stay as still as possible. Can you do that?" Jonathan nods. He doesn't trust his voice. The chisel starts with a whine that builds to a high-pitched shriek. The sound in the confined space is incredible, overwhelming, drowning out thought. And Marcus starts working on the concrete next to Jonathan's left hip, chipping away tiny fragments, working with agonizing slowness. The vibrations travel through the concrete and into Jonathan's body. It feels like his bones are rattling, like he's being shaken apart from the inside. Every impact of the chisel sends a jolt through him, and he has to clench his teeth to keep from crying out. Marcus works for 20 minutes, then has to take a break. His arms are shaking from the effort, and the noise has left him temporarily deaf. Another rescuer takes his place, continuing the work, and then another. They're working in shifts, chipping away at the concrete, but the progress is maddeningly slow. After 2 hours, they've only managed to expose a few inches of Jonathan's left side. Jonathan is beginning to lose hope. He can feel himself slipping, feel his mind starting to detach from his body. The cold has settled deep into his core, and despite the blankets, he can't stop shivering. His thoughts are becoming sluggish, confused. He keeps losing track of time, drifting in and out of a haze that might be unconsciousness or might just be exhaustion. At some point, he realizes there are more people above. He can hear new voices, authoritative ones, giving orders. Someone mentions calling in the army. Someone else is talking about heavy machinery, about whether they can risk using an excavator to widen the shaft. The debate goes on, voices rising and falling, but Jonathan can't follow it anymore. He's too tired. The radio crackles near his ear. It's the paramedic again. "Jonathan, I need you to stay with me. Can you hear me?" "Yeah," Jonathan mumbles. "We're giving you something for the pain and something to keep you warm. There's going to be a needle. Don't be alarmed." A rescuer descends with a medical kit. The paramedic, on the radio, talks him through setting up an IV line in Jonathan's arm. The needle is a sharp pinch, startlingly clear in the fog of sensation, and then there's a coolness spreading up his arm. Saline to keep him hydrated, and morphine to dull the pain that he hasn't fully acknowledged yet, but that's waiting for him like a monster in the dark. The morphine helps. The world becomes softer, less urgent. The sound of the chisels fades to a distant, almost soothing rhythm. Jonathan's eyes drift closed, and for a while he lets himself float. He dreams, fragmented images, memories mixing with hallucinations. He's at the seaside with Sarah, eating fish and chips, laughing at seagulls. He's a child, playing in his grandmother's garden, digging holes in the dirt. He's back in the shaft, but this time he's above the concrete, climbing the ladder, reaching for the light. When he wakes, it's dark. Someone has positioned lights in the shaft, harsh white halogen floods that make him squint. He doesn't know what time it is. He doesn't know how long he's been down here. The chisels are still working, their rhythm unchanged. But when he looks down, he can see that they've made real progress. His left side is almost completely free. the concrete broken away to reveal his work clothes, torn and stained, but intact. "We're getting there," Marcus says. He's back on the platform, looking exhausted but determined. "A couple more hours and we'll have you out." A couple more hours. Jonathan tries to hold on to that, tries to make it real in his mind. He will get out. He will see the sky. He will breathe fresh air and feel the ground under his feet and go home. But his right leg is still completely encased in concrete. And when they start working on that side, chipping away at the concrete around his right hip, Jonathan feels something give. There's a sensation of pressure releasing, and then a wave of pain so intense that he screams. The morphine isn't enough. Nothing could be enough for this. It's like they've driven a spike into my femur, like they're tearing me apart. The chisel stops immediately. Marcus is shouting something, but Jonathan can't hear him over his own screaming. The paramedic's voice is on the radio, urgent, demanding to know what happened. And Jonathan is writhing against the concrete, trying to escape the pain, but there's nowhere to go. They give him more morphine, enough to kill the pain, but not enough to knock him out completely. They need him conscious, responsive. Rachel descends again, examines the area where Marcus was working, and Jonathan can see her face go pale. "We hit bone," she says quietly. Not to Jonathan, but to someone above on the radio. "His hip is fractured. We need to be more careful." They modify their approach. Instead of working directly on the concrete around Jonathan, they start working above him, creating a cavity in the concrete that fills the shaft. If they can remove enough of the mass above his waist, they might be able to lift him straight up, concrete and all, and deal with his legs once he's on the surface. It's a good plan. It might even work. But it requires removing tons of concrete, literal tons, and doing it without destabilizing the shaft or dropping debris on Jonathan's head. They bring in a small crane, position it over the shaft, and start lowering down cables with hooks. They chip away sections of concrete, attach the cables, and lift the pieces out. Each section weighs several hundred pounds and has to be maneuvered carefully through the narrow shaft. Jonathan watches all of this in a morphine haze. He's cast fear now, past hope. He's just existing moment to moment, trying to stay conscious, trying to stay alive. The pain in his hip is a constant throb, even through the drugs. His legs are gone, not just numb, but absent, like they've been amputated and nobody told him. Hour after hour they work. The circle of sky above him goes from gray to black as night falls. They bring in floodlights, bright enough to turn the construction site into day. He can hear the hum of generators, the clank and machinery, voices calling out instructions. The world above is working to save him, and all he can do is wait. At some point, Rachel comes down again. She looks exhausted, her face drawn and smudged with concrete dust. "We're almost there," she says. "Another few hours and we'll have enough clearance to lift you." "What time is it?" Jonathan asks. His voice is hoarse, barely audible. "Just after 2 in the morning," Rachel says. "You've been down here for 18 hours. 18 hours. It feels like 18 years. Jonathan closes his eyes, tries to wrap his mind around that number, and can't. Time has lost all meaning. But they keep working, and slowly, inch by inch, they're winning. The concrete mass above Jonathan shrinks. They've carved a cavity in the concrete, a roughly cylindrical space that extends several feet above his head. They've attached a harness to him, thick straps that go under his arms and around his chest. When the time comes, they're going to pull him straight up, fast and hard, and hope that the concrete around his legs breaks away instead of tearing him apart.
Because if Jonathan has learned anything from his experience, it's that survival is a choice. Not always, not in every situation, but more often than people think. There were moments in that shaft when Jonathan could have given up, could have let the panic overwhelm him, could have stopped fighting. The morphine haze would have been easy to sink into, easy to just close his eyes and drift away. But he didn't. He chose to stay present, to stay conscious, to keep fighting for every breath. And that choice, repeated minute after minute, hour after hour, is what saved his life. Rachel grows up hearing the story, though Jonathan and Sarah keep it age-appropriate, leaving out the worst details until she's older. She knows that Daddy had an accident at work, that he was hurt very badly, that brave people helped him. She knows that's why he walks funny sometimes, why he doesn't like small spaces, why he always checks to make sure she's safe, maybe a little more obsessively than other parents. When she's 12, Rachel asks to see the bridge. Jonathan thinks about saying no, thinks about keeping that part of his past separate from his present. But Sarah gives him a look that says she thinks it's important, and Jonathan trusts her judgment. So on a Saturday in October, they drive out to junction 27 of the M25. Jonathan parks on the shoulder, and they all get out. The bridge looks exactly the same as it always has, unremarkable, just another piece of infrastructure. Traffic flows overhead in an endless stream. The construction site is long gone, replaced by landscaping and barriers. There's no plaque, no marker, nothing to indicate what happened here. Rachel stands next to her father, holding his hand, looking up at the bridge. "That's where you were?" she asks. "Right there," Jonathan says, pointing to the foundation on the north side, about 20 feet down. "Were you scared?" Jonathan considers lying, giving her the brave hero version, but he's never lied to his daughter and he's not going to start now. "Yes," he says, "I was terrified." "But you got out." "But I got out." Rachel squeezes his hand. "I'm glad you got out," she says simply. And Jonathan realizes that this is what survival means, ultimately. Not the dramatic rescue or the newspaper headlines or the speaking engagements, but this. Standing on the side of a motorway with his wife and daughter, alive and whole and here. The concrete didn't claim him. The earth didn't keep him. He's still here, still breathing, still part of the world. They drive home as the sun is setting, Rachel chattering about something that happened at school, Sarah making plans for dinner. Normal life, boring and beautiful and precious. And Jonathan thinks about the bridge receding behind them, about the foundation buried in the ground, about the space he occupied for 19 hours that's now filled with solid concrete. He thinks about how close he came to being entombed there forever, to becoming a ghost story, a cautionary tale, a name on a memorial. He thinks about all the things he would have missed: his wedding, his daughter's birth, 10 years of sunrises and rainstorms and ordinary moments that add up to a life. The concrete tried to take all of that from him. For 19 hours, it held him in a grip of stone, squeezing the life out of him inch by inch. But he refused to surrender. He held on when holding on seemed impossible. He stayed alive when dying would have been easier. And in the end, that made all the difference. Jonathan Hancocks was buried alive in a bridge foundation on November 14, 1999. But he didn't stay buried. He fought his way back to the surface, back to the light, back to life. And every day since then has been a victory, a middle finger raised to the concrete and the darkness and everything that tried to claim him. He drives home through the evening traffic, his wife beside him, his daughter in the backseat, and he's grateful. Grateful for the rescuers who saved him. Grateful for the doctors who healed him. Grateful for every painful step of recovery, every setback and small triumph, every moment that brought him to this one. The bridge is behind him now. The concrete is behind him. He's free. And he's never going back down.
At 4:30 in the morning, Rachel makes the call. "We're gonna do it now," she says. "Are you ready?" Jonathan isn't ready. He'll never be ready. But he nods anyway. They clear everyone out of the shaft except for Marcus, who stays on the platform to guide Jonathan's ascent. The crane engine revs, the cable attached to Jonathan's harness goes taut, and then they start to lift. The pressure is immediate and agonizing. The harness digs into Jonathan's armpits and chest, taking his full weight plus the weight of the concrete still attached to his legs. He can feel his shoulders screaming in their sockets, feel his ribs compressing, and his legs, oh God, his legs, there's something happening down there, something tearing and breaking, and he's screaming again, screaming like he's being murdered, because maybe he is. But he's moving. He's rising out of the concrete, slowly, so slowly, but rising. He can feel the concrete around his legs cracking, feel pieces breaking away and falling. The pressure is unbearable, but it's changing, shifting, and then suddenly there's a horrible wrenching sensation and his right leg comes free. His left leg is still stuck. The concrete there hasn't broken cleanly. It's holding him, dragging him back down, and for a terrible moment, Jonathan is suspended between the upward pull of the crane and the downward pull of the concrete being torn in half. He's screaming, animal sounds that don't even sound human, and Marcus is shouting into his radio, and the crane stops. They lower him back down, just an inch, just enough to take the pressure off. Marcus scrambles down to where Jonathan's left leg is still encased, and he starts working with the chisel again, targeting the concrete in a frenzy, sending chips flying. Jonathan can feel every impact, can feel them through his bones, but he doesn't care anymore. He just wants out. He wants this to be over. It takes another 20 minutes. 20 minutes of careful, frantic work, Marcus chipping away at the concrete while Jonathan hangs in the harness, half in and half out of his prison. And then, finally, blessedly, the last section breaks away and Jonathan's left leg comes free. They lift him fast this time. No more careful, measured progress. They just haul him up 30 feet and maybe 15 seconds, and hands are grabbing him, pulling him onto solid ground, and he's out. He's out. After 19 hours in the shaft, Jonathan Hancocks is back in the world. He can't appreciate it yet. The pain is too overwhelming, a white-hot agony that's radiating from his legs and drowning everything else. He's on a stretcher and paramedics are swarming over him, cutting away his clothes, starting new IV lines, calling out vital signs. He catches a glimpse of his legs and wishes he hadn't. They're mangled, discolored, swollen to twice their normal size. His right leg is bent at an angle that legs aren't supposed to bend. They're loading him into an ambulance. Someone is holding an oxygen mask over his face. The morphine is hitting hard now, more than they gave him before, and the world is dissolving into fragments. He sees Rachel's face above him, and she's smiling, actually smiling, and he tries to smile back, but he's not sure his face is working properly. "You're gonna be okay," she says. "You're gonna be okay." And then the doors close, and the ambulance is moving, and Jonathan lets himself go. The hospital is a blur. Surgery, one after another. They have to repair the fractures in his hip and femur, complicated breaks that require pins and plates. They have to treat the chemical burns, which have eaten through skin and muscle in several places. They have to restore circulation to his feet, which were without adequate blood flow for nearly 20 hours. For a while, the doctors aren't sure they can save his right leg. The damage is extensive, the tissue necrosing in places. But they keep working, and slowly, incrementally, they pull him back from the edge. Jonathan spends 6 weeks in the hospital. The first week is largely lost to pain medication and fever as his body fights off infection. The second week is physical therapy, agonizing sessions where they try to get him to move toes that don't want to move, to bear weight on legs that don't want to hold him. By the third week, he's able to sit up, to feed himself, to start thinking about what his life is going to look like now. Sarah is there every day. She takes time off work, sits by his bedside for hours, holds his hand when the pain gets too bad. She doesn't cry, at least not in front of him, but he can see the strain in her face, the shadows under her eyes. She tells him about the news coverage, how his rescue was on the front page of every paper, how people have been calling him a hero for surviving. Jonathan doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like someone who got unlucky and then got lucky, in that order. The investigation into the accident reveals systemic failures. The wooden formwork was substandard, not properly braced for the weight of concrete it was meant to hold. The safety protocols were inadequate, with no spotter assigned to keep track of workers in the shaft, and the concrete pour had continued for several minutes after the formwork failed, even though it should have been stopped immediately. The company that owns the construction site is fined heavily. Several managers are fired. New safety regulations are implemented across the industry. None of this changes what happened to Jonathan. None of it gives him back those 19 hours or the months of recovery that follow, or the nightmares that wake him up gasping in the middle of the night, convinced he's still in the shaft, still trapped, still waiting to be crushed. But slowly, painfully, he heals. The fractures knit together, the burns scar over. He graduates from a wheelchair to crutches to a cane. 8 months after the accident, he walks out of his final physical therapy session under his own power, limping but mobile. The doctors tell him he'll always have pain, always have limited mobility in his right hip. They tell him he's lucky to be walking at all. Jonathan knows they're right. He's seen the x-rays, seen the photographs of his legs taken in the emergency room. He knows how close he came to losing everything. But lucky isn't the word he'd use. Fortunate maybe, resilient, stubborn, but not lucky. He doesn't go back to construction work. That part of his life is over, sealed off as completely as if it had been set in concrete. He retrains as a safety inspector, someone who goes to construction sites and makes sure the workers are protected, makes sure the formwork is sound, makes sure nobody else has to spend 19 hours buried alive. It's good work, important work, and it gives him a sense of purpose that had been missing before. Sarah stands by him through all of it. They get married 2 years after the accident, a small ceremony at a registry office, nothing fancy. Jonathan walks her down the aisle, limping, but walking. And when the register says, "You may kiss the bride," he kisses her like she's the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. Because in a lot of ways she is. He still thinks about that day. Not as often as he used to, but it's there, a permanent resident in the back of his mind. Sometimes he'll be walking down the street and he'll step on a piece of concrete, and for just a second he's back in the shaft, feeling the cold gray sludge rising around him. Sometimes he'll hear a loud crack, wood breaking or metal snapping, and his heart rate will spike and his hands will start shaking, and he'll have to stop and breathe and remind himself that he's safe, he's above ground, he's okay. But he is okay. That's the thing that surprises him, even years later. He survived something that should have killed him. He endured something that would have broken most people, and he came out the other side changed, but intact. Damaged, but not destroyed. There's a bridge now at Junction 27 of the M25. It carries thousands of vehicles every day, commuters who have no idea what happened during its construction. The foundation that trapped Jonathan is buried under tons of asphalt and concrete, invisible and permanent. Sometimes Jonathan drives past it, just to see it, just to remind himself that it's real, that it happened, that he was there.
But he fought back. He stayed conscious when he could have given up. He stayed alive when he could have died. He refused to become part of the bridge. And on those days when he drives past, when he sees the traffic flowing overhead, when he thinks about what lies beneath, he allows himself a small, grim smile. Because he won. Against the concrete, against the odds, against the crushing weight of the earth itself, Jonathan Hancocks won. The psychological scars take longer to heal than the physical ones. For the first year, Jonathan can't be in enclosed spaces. Elevators are impossible. Even small rooms make his chest tighten and his breathing accelerate. He develops a compulsive need to know where all the exits are, mapping escape routes everywhere he goes like he's planning a heist. The therapist he starts seeing calls it hypervigilance, a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. Jonathan calls it staying alive. The nightmares are the worst part. They come several times a week at first, vivid reconstructions of those 19 hours that feel more real than memory. In the dreams, the concrete is rising faster, or the rescuers never come, or they come but they can't get him out, and he has to watch as the concrete reaches his neck, his chin, his mouth. He wakes up thrashing, sometimes shouting, sheets soaked with sweat. Sarah holds him through these episodes, doesn't try to tell him it was just a dream, because they both know it wasn't. It was real, and some part of Jonathan is still down there, still trapped, still waiting. But time does what time does. The nightmares become less frequent, the panic attacks become manageable. Jonathan learns techniques, breathing exercises, and grounding methods, ways to pull himself back to the present when his mind tries to drag him into the past. He learns that recovery isn't linear, that there will be good days and bad days, and that's okay. He learns that surviving isn't the same as healing, but it's a necessary first step. 3 years after the accident, Jonathan agrees to give an interview to a construction safety magazine. It's the first time he's spoken publicly about what happened, and he's nervous, worried that talking about it will bring everything back. But the interview is conducted by a former construction worker who lost a friend to a site accident, and there's an understanding between them that makes it easier. Jonathan talks about the sound of the formwork breaking, about the feeling of the concrete rising around him, about the 19 hours of waiting. He talks about the rescuers who saved his life, about the firefighters and paramedics who worked through the night to free him. The magazine publishes the interview with photographs of the accident site, diagrams showing how the formwork failed, expert analysis of what went wrong. It becomes one of their most read pieces, shared across the construction industry, used in safety training courses. Jonathan starts getting messages from workers who've read his story, thanking him for speaking out, telling him about near misses they have experienced, close calls that could have ended differently. He realizes that his story matters, that it might actually save lives, and that gives him something he hasn't felt in a long time: purpose. He throws himself into his work as a safety inspector with renewed energy. He becomes known as a hard ass, the guy who will shut down a site without hesitation if he sees something unsafe. Some contractors complain, call him paranoid, say he's overreacting. Jonathan doesn't care. He's seen what happens when safety protocols are ignored, when corners are cut to save time or money. He's lived it, and he'll be damned if he's gonna let it happen to someone else on his watch. The construction company that owned the site where Jonathan was injured eventually settles a lawsuit with him out of court. The amount is confidential, but it's enough that Jonathan and Sarah can buy a house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet suburb. It has a garden where Sarah plants flowers, and a garage where Jonathan can work on the vintage motorcycle he's restoring, and big windows that let in light. No basements. Jonathan was very clear about that. Nothing underground. 5 years after the accident, Jonathan is invited to speak at a construction safety conference in Birmingham. It's a big event, hundreds of industry professionals, and Jonathan almost declines. Public speaking terrifies him in a way that's almost funny, given what he's survived. But Sarah encourages him, tells him that people need to hear his story directly from him, not filtered through articles or reports. So he agrees. The night before the conference, Jonathan lies awake in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what he's going to say. He's written a speech, practiced it dozens of times, but it all feels wrong, too formal, too distant. Finally, around 3 a.m, he gives up on sleep and starts rewriting. He throws out most of what he'd prepared and decides to just tell the truth, plainly and simply. The next afternoon, he stands on stage in front of 300 people and talks about the worst day of his life. He doesn't dramatize it or try to make himself sound heroic. He just describes what happened, step by step, moment by moment. The silence in the auditorium is absolute. Nobody coughs, nobody checks their phone. They're all listening, really listening, and Jonathan can see his story landing with the weight it deserves. When he finishes, the applause is long and loud, but Jonathan barely hears it. He's thinking about the young workers in the audience, the ones who are just starting their careers, who still think they're invincible. He's thinking about the managers and supervisors, the ones who make the decisions that keep people safe or put them at risk. He's thinking about the concrete still rising somewhere in the back of his mind, and the fact that talking about it has somehow made it a little less terrifying. Afterward, people line up to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their own stories. A young woman tells him about her father who died in a trench collapse. An older man talks about watching a crane accident, how he still hears the sound in his dreams. He listens to all of them, bears witness to their trauma, and realizes that he's not alone. There are thousands of people in this industry who carry similar scars, who've seen things or experienced things that most people can't imagine, and they need to talk about it, need to be heard, need to know that what happened to them matters. Jonathan starts speaking at conferences regularly. He becomes an advocate for construction worker safety, testifying before government committees, consulting with companies on their safety protocols, writing articles for trade publications. It's not the career he imagined when he was 26 years old, standing at the bottom of that shaft, but it's the career he has now, and it means something. The physical pain never completely goes away. There are days when his hip aches so badly he can barely walk, when the weather changes and his legs throb in memory of what they endured. He's had 3 additional surgeries to deal with complications from the original injuries, bone spurs and damaged cartilage and arthritis that set in early. He walks with a slight limp now, probably will for the rest of his life, but he walks. That's what matters. 10 years after the accident, Jonathan and Sarah have a daughter. They name her Rachel, after the rescue team leader who coordinated his extraction. The original Rachel sends a card and a teddy bear and tells them she's honored. Jonathan holds his daughter for the first time in the hospital, this tiny, perfect person who has no idea what his father has been through, and he makes her a silent promise. He promises to keep her safe, to protect her from the dangers of the world, but also to teach her to be strong, to face her fears, to survive whatever life throws at her.